What if the life you thought you knew, your marriage, your family, everything, was built on secrets you never saw coming? Jason Walker sat alone in his living room. It was a Saturday afternoon, quiet and still, with the house empty except for him. His two children, Maya and Ethan, had moved to bigger cities. Sarah, his wife of 25 years, was out of town visiting family, something she had done many times over the years. And for the first time in a long time, Jason was left to his thoughts. It wasn't that he minded the silence, it felt like a rare moment of peace, a chance to relax. But there was something about this stillness that didn't sit right with him. It wasn't just the absence of Sarah or the kids, it was a deeper, more unsettling feeling, like something important was missing, something he couldn't quite identify. 4 years, their marriage had settled into a routine. After all, who could blame them? Raising 2 kids, managing careers, and juggling daily life's demands left little time for the passion they once shared. Jason had convinced himself that this was just the natural progression of things. It was what happened after 2 decades of marriage. But today, as he sat in the living room, the quiet felt like a warning, like the calm before a storm he couldn't predict. And before the day was over, Jason would learn that everything he believed about his life was about to change. With a rare moment of peace, Jason decided to tackle something that had been on his to-do list for months, cleaning out the attic. He pulled down the old wooden ladder and climbed up into the dusty space filled with boxes, forgotten memories, and the kind of clutter that always accumulated over the years. The house had once felt full of life, but now, it felt emptier than ever. As he rummaged through one of the boxes, something caught his eye. It was a leather-bound diary, faded with age and tucked into a corner. Jason recognized it instantly. Sarah's handwriting had always been distinct. The diary was from their early years together before they got married and before the kids came into the picture. Jason had seen it once or twice over the years but had never thought much of it. She kept it hidden away with other old mementos, letters, photos, and trinkets from a life they'd built together. Jason paused, his fingers hovering over the worn cover. He felt a surge of guilt. He wasn't the type to invade someone's privacy, especially not Sarah's. They'd built their marriage on trust, hadn't they? But something about that diary, sitting there in the box, called to him. It was like it held a secret that needed to be uncovered. A piece of their past that he had never seen. After a few moments of hesitation, Jason gave in to the pull of curiosity. He flipped open the diary, each page more fragile than the last, and began to read. The first few pages of the diary are filled with Sarah's youthful excitement, her hopeful dreams, and her early thoughts on their relationship. She writes with an energy that feels almost naive, as though the world was a place where everything was possible. Jason can see her, just a few years younger, filled with optimism as she reflects on how they met. She talks about their first dates, the walks through the park, the late-night conversations where they shared their most intimate thoughts, the way they both felt like they were meant to be together. She writes about their future, and how she envisioned a life of shared dreams. They talked about getting married, having children, and building a home. She was so sure of it all, so confident in their love, and that sense of certainty was clear in her words. Sarah's writing captures the innocence of a young couple who believe that their love can conquer anything. Jason can almost hear her voice in his head as he reads, remembering the excitement she had back then. He recalls how, when they were first together, they'd spend hours talking about the future, making plans and promises that felt unbreakable. But as he flips to the next page, the tone of the diary shifts. The carefree joy of their early days together fades, and Jason begins to see a more vulnerable side of Sarah, one he never knew existed. Sarah writes about a man named Elliot, someone she was deeply in love with long before she ever met Jason. This was her first love, a man who she thought was the one. She writes about the connection they shared, how every moment with him felt electrifying, as though nothing else in the world mattered when they were together. It's clear from her words that she was all in, that her feelings for Elliot went deeper than anything she had ever experienced. She describes the excitement of their first kiss, the long drives where they talked for hours, and the way he made her feel like she was the most important person in the world. But then, she writes about the pain, the sharp, gut-wrenching heartbreak when Elliot betrayed her trust. Jason reads as Sarah explains how, one day, Elliot just disappeared from her life without warning. He stopped calling and stopped answering texts. She waited for him to come back, hoping that it was just a misunderstanding, but he never did. The words Sarah uses to describe her pain are raw, as if she's still grieving the loss of that love. Elliot's sudden abandonment left a mark on her heart, something she never fully healed from. She writes about how she learned to move on, and how she convinced herself that she was stronger than the heartbreak, but there's an underlying sadness in her words. It's as if Sarah never really let go of Elliot, even though she continued with her life. As Jason reads, a wave of confusion crashes over him. The realization hits him like a punch to the gut. Was he just the replacement for Elliot? Had Sarah settled for him, not because she loved him the same way she loved Elliot, but because she needed someone to fill the void left by that lost love? Jason's heart starts to race as the questions swirl in his mind. Did she ever truly get over Elliot? How could she have been so deeply hurt by him, and yet move on so easily to someone else, him, of all people? Jason begins to wonder if, all these years, he's been living in the shadow of a love that was never truly his, to begin with. The impact of this revelation begins to gnaw at Jason. He rereads the pages, trying to make sense of what he's learned. The more he thinks about it, the more the doubts creep in. Has he always been the second choice? A placeholder for the love that Sarah lost? The thought stabs at him like a knife. He had always believed their relationship was unique, that their love was real, but now everything feels uncertain. Was their marriage, their entire life together, built on a foundation that was never as strong as he thought? The realization that he never knew about Elliot, never even heard her speak of him, leaves him feeling blindsided. How could Sarah have kept something so important from him? Jason's frustration begins to bubble up. He starts to feel a deep sense of insecurity, something he's never felt in their relationship before. The more he reads, the more his mind races. Has everything he thought he knew about their marriage been a lie? He had always prided himself on being a good husband, doing everything he could for Sarah and their family, but now he feels like he was just going through the motions while Sarah held onto a past she never let go of. It's a painful realization, one that threatens to shatter the image of their life together that he had built in his mind. Jason sets the diary down for a moment, trying to catch his breath. His mind is reeling. The excitement he once felt about their life together now feels hollow. How could he have missed this? All these years, he never knew how much Sarah's first love had affected her. He never knew about Elliot, never realized how much of Sarah's heart might still be tied to him. And now, as he sits there, holding the diary in his hands, Jason wonders if there's any way forward, or if this revelation has already changed everything. Jason turned another page of the diary, his hands trembling. The further he read, the more unsettling the words became. Sarah's handwriting, once so familiar to him, now felt foreign, almost cold. He had always believed their marriage was built on trust and openness, but the words in front of him were threatening to shatter that belief. Then, his eyes froze on a particular entry. I don't know why I let it happen. I should have stopped before it even started. But he made me feel seen, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Jason doesn't understand me anymore. I needed something to remind me that I was still me, not just a wife and mother. Jason's heart skipped a beat. The words hit him like a punch to the stomach. Sarah was admitting, for the first time, that she had been unfaithful. The person she was writing about, Mark, was a name he had never heard. A colleague from her early career, someone he had never met. It wasn't supposed to go this far, Sarah continued in her diary. At first, it was just harmless flirting. But then we started talking more, and I started feeling something. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. He made me feel desired, and important. It was just supposed to be a distraction, a way to fill the space I felt inside. But it turned into more. I couldn't stop myself. Jason's stomach turned. He could feel his pulse racing, his hands tightening on the diary as if it could somehow shield him from the storm of emotions brewing inside him. Sarah's words were raw and painfully honest, but they were also a brutal betrayal. His mind screamed in disbelief. How could she have done this? How could she have kept this from him for so long? As Jason read on, the details of the affair spilled out. It wasn't just a one-night mistake. It was a full-fledged affair that lasted for months, an affair that had been hidden right under his nose. Sarah wrote about the first time she and Mark crossed a line, how they went for drinks after work, how they talked about everything from the weather to their dreams, and how she began confiding in him about things she never shared with Jason. Slowly, over time, their emotional connection deepened. Mark seemed to be everything Jason wasn't, someone who listened to her, understood her feelings and made her feel important. It wasn't about the sex, Sarah wrote. It was about the way he made me feel alive again. He made me feel like I mattered, like I wasn't invisible. I didn't even realize how much I had been craving that until I had it. Jason's chest tightened. Each sentence he read made him feel smaller, more insignificant. He had always thought of himself as Sarah's rock, the person she leaned on, the one she trusted above all others. But in these pages, he was nothing more than a distant memory, a shadow in the background of Sarah's life. And Mark? Mark was the one who made her feel seen, heard, and desired. Jason wanted to stop reading, but he couldn't. The words pulled him deeper, like a dark hole he couldn't escape. Sarah's next entry was filled with guilt. She wrote about the shame she felt, how she couldn't even look at herself in the mirror after each meeting with Mark. She knew what she was doing was wrong, but it didn't stop her. She hated herself for letting it go as far as it did, but at the same time, she couldn't bring herself to end it. I feel like I'm two different people. One is the wife I'm supposed to be, the mother of our children. The other is someone who just wants to be loved, wanted, and free of the pressures of being everything to everyone. I can't do both. I don't know how to. Jason read this over and over. His mind was reeling. He couldn't reconcile the woman he knew with the one in these pages. The Sarah he had married, the woman who had always been there for him, the woman he had trusted with everything, was suddenly someone else. Someone who could betray him in the most painful way possible. What hurt most was the realization that Sarah had never told him. She had kept this secret for years, hidden behind the smile and the gentle words that he had always believed were genuine. She had never come to him, never confessed, never tried to work through her feelings with him. Instead, she had chosen to keep her pain locked inside, turning to someone else for comfort. Jason's heart hammered in his chest. 1,000 emotions surged through him all at once: anger, sadness, disbelief, and most of all, confusion. How could this have happened? How had he been so blind? He had trusted Sarah completely, and believed in their marriage, and yet, she had been hiding this from him for years. He started to question everything. Their entire relationship, all the memories they had built together, now seemed tainted. Was it all a lie? Had Sarah ever truly loved him, or had he just been a placeholder in her life until someone else came along to make her feel wanted? Jason's mind raced. He could hear Sarah's voice in his head, telling him over and over that she loved him, and that she never wanted to hurt him. But now, after reading these words, how could he ever believe that again? How could he trust her when she had been hiding such a massive secret from him all this time? The betrayal wasn't just the affair itself. It was the fact that Sarah had never even considered telling him. She had kept it to herself, tucked away in this secret world where he didn't exist. Every time she had kissed him, every time they had made love, every time she had laughed with him, was it all just a facade? A mask she wore to keep him in the dark? Jason's world felt like it was collapsing in on itself. He had always believed in their love, in their vows, in the promises they had made to each other. But now, he wasn't sure what was real anymore. Was their entire marriage built on half-truths? He closed the diary, his hands shaking, but the words wouldn't leave his mind. The images of Sarah and Mark together, the way she had described feeling alive again, echoed in his thoughts. He didn't know how he could ever look at her the same way again. How could he forgive her for this? Could he even move past it? For the first time in their entire marriage, Jason felt completely lost. And he didn't know if he could ever find his way back. As Jason flipped through the pages of the diary, he found himself drawn to Sarah's more recent entries. The writing in these pages felt heavier, more urgent, almost as if Sarah had been carrying an emotional weight she could no longer ignore. In her words, Jason could feel the slow build-up of dissatisfaction that had been growing between them over the years. Sarah spoke of her feelings of being overwhelmed by the demands of raising 2 children, working, and maintaining the household. The weight of their busy life had, over time, suffocated her. She had always been the one to put the family first, but in doing so, she had lost herself. The words jumped out at him. I gave up so much of myself to be the mother and wife they needed, that I don't know who I am anymore. Jason had always known Sarah as the strong, loving mother, the woman who kept everything running smoothly at home while he focused on his career. But reading these words, he felt the sudden sting of guilt. He had never noticed how hard it had been for her. He had been so focused on providing financially, on keeping his job secure, that he hadn't seen the toll it was taking on Sarah. She had been drowning, but he hadn't even seen the signs. She wrote about how, as their children grew older and became more independent, the emotional distance between them grew. She had wanted to connect with Jason on a deeper level, to feel like they were more than just two parents who shared a home. But that desire for closeness was never addressed, and she felt as though her emotional needs were continuously pushed aside. "I am here, but I am invisible," she wrote in one entry, a line that cut Jason to the core. Sarah had been neglected, not by choice, but by circumstance. She didn't just feel lonely, she felt invisible. The intimacy they had once shared had faded, and over time, even their conversations had become shallow. Jason had noticed the silence between them in the evenings after the kids had gone to bed, but he'd never understood it as anything more than the fatigue of raising children. He never questioned why Sarah no longer initiated conversations about their future, why she wasn't interested in the little moments that once brought them joy. But now, as he read her words, Jason realized it wasn't just tiredness, it was a longing for something she had been too afraid to ask for. Sarah had written that she yearned for intimacy, not just physical, but emotional intimacy. She wanted a partner who saw her, heard her, and truly understood what she was feeling. But that was something Jason, lost in his world of work and responsibility, had failed to provide. She wrote about wanting to feel special again, to feel like a woman, not just a mother and wife. "I am more than this," Sarah had written, referring to the role she had taken on for so many years. Jason could feel the strain in her words as she described this internal battle. On one hand, she wanted to be more than the role of a dutiful wife and mother. On the other, she felt guilty for even considering her desires. She was trapped between selfishness and selflessness, between the person she had been before marriage and the person she had become. It was as if she had been holding her breath for years, waiting for something to change, but too afraid to ask for it. Jason realized that she had been silently suffocating in the life they had built together, and he had been blind to it. As he read through her words, Jason felt blindsided. How had he missed this? How had he been so unaware of the emotional distance that had crept into their marriage? He had always assumed they were happy, that the foundation they had built together was strong enough to withstand the challenges of life. But now, he saw everything through a different lens. He could see the cracks in their marriage, cracks that had been there for years, unnoticed by him. Had he been so consumed with his job, with ensuring that they had a stable income, that he had forgotten to look at Sarah as his partner, not just the mother of their children or the caretaker of their home? Had he taken her for granted? His mind raced as he reflected on the past. Sarah's frustration had been there all along, but he had never taken the time to truly listen. He thought of the late nights he'd spent at work, the long hours he'd dedicated to his career, and how, when he came home, he often just collapsed into bed, exhausted. But what about her? What had she been feeling? What had she needed? Jason felt his chest tighten as he realized that, despite all his efforts to provide for the family, he had failed to provide Sarah with the emotional support she craved. He had been blind to the fact that she had been sacrificing her happiness to hold the family together, and he hadn't even noticed. The last entries in Sarah's diary are the hardest for Jason to read. As he flips through the pages, his fingers tremble, and a knot tightens in his stomach. Sarah reveals that, for the past few years, she's been seeing a therapist in secret. This isn't just an occasional visit, but a concerted effort to figure out what's wrong with her life and, by extension, their marriage. In the diary, Sarah writes about the things she's discovered in therapy, the feelings she's suppressed for so long, the anger she feels for not having a voice in the relationship, and the overwhelming loneliness that has settled over her. Her therapist has encouraged her to be honest with herself about what she wants, but that honesty has only led to more confusion. As much as she wants to be open with Jason, she doesn't know how to start the conversation. More importantly, she's unsure of what the future looks like, whether she should stay and try to fix things or leave and start over. Sarah's words sting Jason as he reads. She talks about her desire for a fresh start, though she's uncertain of what that means. Is it a fresh start with someone else? Or is it simply a new chapter in her life, one without Jason? She hasn't made up her mind, but she's been wrestling with the idea for months that she spent carefully hiding her thoughts from him. Jason feels the full weight of her decision. She's already been contemplating leaving him, and he's had no idea. She never once shared these thoughts with him, never gave him a chance to understand her pain or to try and change things. Instead, She's kept it all locked away, until now. The betrayal hits Jason like a physical blow. For the first time, he understands that Sarah's decision to leave him has been brewing for a long time, and he's been completely blind to it. She writes that, at times, she wonders if she could even find happiness again, whether she could be content on her own, away from everything they've built together. But at other times, she's scared. She's afraid of what her life would look like without him, without the family they've worked so hard to create. The indecision, the back and forth between wanting to leave and wanting to stay, is what has paralyzed her. Jason's anger is immediate and intense. He feels furious at Sarah for keeping this from him for so long, but there's also a sharp sting of heartbreak. 4 years, he thought their marriage was fine, that they were just in a temporary lull, but now he knows it's been much deeper than that. Sarah has been silently suffocating, and he never noticed. He can't help but wonder how much of her unhappiness was caused by his failures, his emotional distance. He's been focused on his career, on being a provider, but he's neglected the most important part of their relationship, her. Jason closes the diary, his heart racing. His mind is a whirl of emotions: hurt, anger, confusion, and fear. The life he thought he had with Sarah is now shattered, and he's left standing in the ruins. He knows one thing for sure: nothing will ever be the same again. Jason stood in the living room, holding Sarah's old diary. The house felt too quiet. Sarah had just returned from her visit to family, but something had changed. He wasn't the same man who had waved her off days ago. The truth had hit him hard, and now, standing in front of her, he had a decision to make. He had the power to confront her, lay bare the secrets he had uncovered, or pretend everything was normal. But pretending wasn't possible anymore. Sarah walked in, smiling tiredly as if nothing was wrong. She greeted him, but Jason didn't return the usual warmth. He wasn't sure how to begin, but he knew he couldn't avoid it any longer. "Sarah, we need to talk." His voice sounded different to his ears, more distant, colder. She hesitated, sensing something was wrong, but nodded and followed him into the living room. Jason threw the diary on the coffee table, the leather binding creaking as it hit. Sarah's eyes instantly went to it, and for a moment, she just stared. She hadn't expected this. "What is that?" she asked, her voice shaky, though she already had a sinking feeling. "It's yours, isn't it?" Jason's voice was sharp. "I found it in the attic. You never told me about this." Sarah's eyes widened in panic, but she stayed silent. Jason didn't give her a chance to explain. "I've read it," Jason continued, his tone hardening. "I know about the affair. I know about Elliot. I know about Mark." Sarah froze. The color drained from her face. She had hoped, somehow, that the past could stay buried, but Jason had found everything. The guilt that flooded her was overwhelming. She had no way to hide from it anymore. Jason took a deep breath, trying to control his anger. "Why didn't you tell me?" His voice broke. "What was the affair really about? Did you ever really love me the way I loved you?" Sarah couldn't speak for a long moment. She looked down, ashamed, and then finally managed to speak. "I never meant for you to find out like this," she said quietly. "I was scared. I thought if I kept it all inside, I could fix it. I thought I could forget. But I couldn't. And I never wanted to hurt you." Jason shook his head, his voice tight with frustration. "Scared? Scared of what? Losing me? Losing our family?" She wiped away a tear, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes. I was scared of losing everything. Of you. Of our family." Jason's anger flared again. "And instead, you went and had an affair. You kept that secret for all these years. Why, Sarah?" She looked up at him, tears filling her eyes. "I was lonely, Jason. I didn't know how to talk to you. I thought it would be easier if I just kept it to myself." Jason's face tightened with pain. "But you didn't talk to me. You kept it hidden. And now I'm standing here, knowing all of this, and you never told me." Her face crumpled, and she finally let the tears fall. "I regret it. I regret it all. I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't want to hurt us." Jason stared at her, the weight of the words sinking in. He felt lost, betrayed, hurt, and confused. He couldn't understand how Sarah had let it go on for so long without telling him, without reaching out for help. "I don't know what to do with all of this, Sarah," he said quietly, almost to himself. As Sarah sat there, waiting for Jason to say something. She realized that nothing would ever be the same. Jason looked at her, his mind racing. One thing was clear. Whether Sarah was by his side or not, he had to heal. He couldn't carry this weight forever.